All right, hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is still August 27th, 2023. This is your afternoon update on Tropical Storm Idalia, but this is the longer version of the video. As I talked about in the previous video, we like to break these up into separate, short, need to know, and then the more rambly, put on something so the dog thinks someone's home type videos, and that's what you clicked on with this one. So if you're curious, a little more of the weather metal regarding Idalia, you're in the right place. So again, we went over the latest in the other video, but as a quick update, the latest on Idalia today from the National Hurricane Center. This is the 5 p.m. advisory. We're still looking at a storm with maximum sustained winds only 40 miles an hour, but a storm that is organizing down there in the Western Caribbean, and that northward motion expected to start sometime tomorrow afternoon. A quick motion on Tuesday and a landfall early Wednesday in the Big Bend of Florida as a hurricane. Hurricane watches are up for much of the Florida West Coast today, as we talked about, from about Indian River in the Panhandle down to about Inglewood near Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte, where Ian made landfall last year. And again, this is expected to be probably a Category 2 or 3 hurricane as the latest forecast in the Hurricane Center go. That's going to spread widespread, tropical storm-like conditions across the parts of the Panhandle and parts of the peninsula of Florida and the Big Bend, and the western part of the state is going to get hurricane conditions, hence the hurricane watch up. So definitely some things have changed, the main thing being the eastward jog in this track. And we'll start there as far as the investigation of what is going on. So this is the satellite presentation of Idalia here this afternoon on the Go 16 True Color here on the College DuPage website. The center of the storm is about 80 to 90 miles off to the east of Cozumel. Cozumel, little island right here, so it's moved off to the east considerably. Yesterday, the eye of the storm was actually very close to Cozumel, or almost directly over it, and then it kind of did this little loop motion and wound up drifting a pretty good ways east. And that's kind of what we've been talking about when these weaker storms are getting going. When we say something like, well, we don't really have a great center yet, or it's weak and it's not really well formed, what we mean is these storms are very squishy and malleable when they're getting themselves going. You know what I mean? If you don't have a really well built solid storm yet, they like to reform and they like to move around. And what happened in Adalia's case yesterday is a case of wind shear actually causing a downward push of the center of the storm. So you have the center of circulation yesterday somewhere near Cozumel. You have some thunderstorms firing along the eye, or the primitive eye. I don't want to call it. It's not an eye yet, but it's the center. Eye, center, kind of the same thing but different. Okay, so what happens is over the course of the last day or so, we've had a pretty steadily moderate westerly wind shear on the storms. This is winds out of the west moving across the storm. You can see the clouds on see these high clouds moving away from this little rope cloud right here. You can see a lot of the cirrus outflow moving in this direction. There's a general westerly wind shear over the storm. And what that did is you had your little center and your thunderstorms, but it kind of blew all the thunderstorms off to one side. That wind shear came in and blew the thunderstorms off to the east. Well, all the thunderstorms keep popping up over here. Well, that's where the pressure's falling. That's where the height falls are. So the eye starts moving towards those because it wants to follow that lower pressure. So the eye essentially just followed it. Now, nothing was pushing the eye, as in there was no wind actually pushing the eye itself. There's no steering current right here to move the storm in any real meaningful direction. But just because of where the down shear thunderstorm activity was happening, the eye of the storm simply followed those thunderstorms. So the whole storm, quote unquote, drifted to the east. Now, our computer models don't pick up on this very well. So when you see that movement, the models still thought the storm was right here. So that was what the westerly track was. All our computer models took it off from here and did this. Well, then today the computer models go, oh wait, the storm's over here. So they draw those same lines, and now you have that easterly shift in the forecast guidance. And that's one of the things we saw today with Idalia. We zoom in a little bit, we can actually see that there is still some dry air impacting the storm. The center of the storm right there, if you look right there in that little window I just drew, you can see some low clouds moving to the north. You can see some clouds moving like this, and then there's some more clouds wrapping in here. The eye of the storm is actually, or the center of the circulation is right here, but it's partially exposed. There's about this much of the eye that is exposed here this morning, and there is some breaks in the clouds. And again, there's some very notable dry air features. These little rope clouds you see kind of racing out. You have one here. You have an outflow boundary moving across Florida, and then you have a big outflow boundary north of Cuba. This is all indication that there is dry air in this vicinity, and it is wrapping into the storm. Now, it looks like Idalia will be able to overcome that in a fairly short order as these thunderstorms wrap around. That will probably cut that off. But at least for the time being, there is some drier air working into the storm, and that's probably why we're only dealing with a 40-mile-an-hour tropical storm right now. What are the other things going on here this morning? Or this afternoon? Well, we have. I'm saying morning because I just woke up a few hours ago. So if I say that again, I apologize. Well, we have some NOAA and Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter missions. Again, I'm out here in Keesler Air Force Base. We're sending some guys out tonight and some more tomorrow to investigate this. NOAA has sent their upper air Gulf Stream aircraft out. So this flight plan over the Gulf of Mexico is surveying all the air features: upper air, lower air, dry air, all the stuff our models need to compute the future of Idalia as she moves through this environment. Well, our models are going to get a look at what she's about to move into, which will help them make better forecasts. So all this data is going to get ingested tonight, and then our newer models in the morning will probably have a pretty good idea of what we're looking at as far as locking that track in. Again, the tug and pull here is that you're going to have at least somewhat drier air over the Gulf of Mexico, and you're going to have this westerly wind shear component for a little while longer. So Idalia is going to move into this environment that's not pristine. It's not picture perfect. It's not like when we saw with Laura or Ida or even Ian where it was like, oh crap, that looks perfect. Uh-oh, this is a problem. She's not moving into a 10 out of 10 environment, but the waters are red hot. This is the Gulf of Mexico's current water temperature is 31 to 32 degrees Celsius. That is so pink, my pink marker doesn't even show up in it, which is very concerning. That is about 2 to 3 degrees warmer than they're supposed to be. And 2 to 3 degrees does not sound like a lot, but when you start get your square cube laws and all your mathematics go into it, it's a lot more energy potentially available for the hurricane than if the water temperature was a little cooler. So you also have the Miami's oceanic heat content map. It's going to go over what we call the loop current, which is this little current right here. Idalia will pass through a lot of the loop current on her way northward. It'll eventually get into some cooler, lower oceanic heat content. But I mean, this kind of stuff right here near Cuba, that's just rocket fuel. So definitely not something we want to see. So one of the things we're going to be looking at over the next day or so is when Idalia leaves Cuba, when we have the storm start moving north tomorrow afternoon, what are we looking at? We have a kind of partially exposed, sloppy, but ominous looking tropical storm making 40, 45 mile an hour winds right now. Okay. We have about another day. We have about another 24 hours from now is when Idalia is going to start moving northward. Okay. What is moving northward in 24 hours? Is it still a 45 mile an hour, sloppy, exposed, kind of lopsided tropical storm? Or is it a more wrapped up, well developed, primitive eye wall building, high end tropical storm, or even, God forbid, a hurricane? And there's a couple model solutions here. The GFS model sees a 991 millibar storm leaving Cuba tomorrow evening. The European model sees roughly the same thing, a 995 millibar tropical storm moving north of Cuba. Now, some of our other models, such as the HWRF, one of our higher intensity models, does see a much stronger storm. This sees a 983 millibar, probably hurricane with a closed, 93 would certainly be a hurricane, with a full eye already built moving north of Cuba. If you take this and drop it into the Gulf of Mexico, wind shear or dry air or not, you're going to have a major hurricane on the doorstep of Florida. There is no arguing that. If it's more like the GFS, where it's kind of this sloppier storm, you have some room for this thing to continue to have issues. The thing is this, the environment she's moving into the Gulf of Mexico tomorrow night and on Tuesday, okay, the Gulf of Mexico right here. Yeah, there's some drier air, and yeah, there's some wind shear. We just showed you the evidence of both. It's not death to a hurricane. This is not going to ruin a hurricane. If a hurricane enters this, then she's pretty much going to laugh at all that crap. That's going to be like them shooting the pistols at Superman and see like, haha, that's funny. But if you take this storm and just drag it northward right now, it's going to continue to struggle. Storms that are already struggling that then have to deal with dry air and shear typically struggle even more because they're already exposed. They have to fight it off. They can't really do it, blah, blah, blah. But if you already have a wrapped up, like if you took Franklin over here just off your screen, Hurricane Franklin, and dropped it right here and moved it northward instead of Idalia, Franklin would just push all this crap away and laugh at it as it moved northward. So what moves into the Gulf? It's not just a matter of, okay, will storm start stronger, so it ends stronger. That's like, caveman, yeah, duh. But it also, a stronger storm will be more resilient to the shear in the dry air in the first place, whereas a weaker storm will have to work harder to overcome that in the term. And then also, if the storm has to spend half of its time moving across the Gulf, getting to this point where, okay, now I can start intensifying because I've now built my eye and I've got the structural processes in play to start making my little hot towers and start doing my thing to become a hurricane, it runs out of time because it doesn't have a lot of time over this warm water because it's going to be moving at a pretty good clip. It's got maybe 24 hours, if not maybe 30. But if it's already a well-developed tropical storm or, God forbid, a hurricane, and then it starts moving northward and it has this whole time to take advantage of this, then, look out, you're in trouble. That's a big checkpoint in this future here. I can show you the latest models, GFS and Euro again. We'll go back to these guys. European brings it up, deepens it pretty good, brings it into the Big Bend near like Cedar Key or Steinhatchee is about 979, which is stronger than the Euro has been trending. It is now seeing a hurricane for sure. GFS model is pretty similar. It's still on the western end of the envelope. It brings it up more into Appalachia Bay at 967. That's going to be a significant hurricane, probably close to Category 3. The HWRF model, for whatever it's worth, moves northward, and the 12Z run brings it into Appalachia Bay at 957, which is well into Category 3. That's probably like a 120, 106 knots. It's about 115 miles an hour, 958 on the millibars. I mean, that's a Category 3 hurricane coming into the Big Bend region. HWRF is typically, like I said, the higher end intensity model guidance is pretty much the HWRF is usually hanging out in that upper echelon, but it's pretty useful because a lot of times it has something to tell you. Again, all these models just tell you something. It's just Lassie runs up, Timmy's in a well, what's going on? These models are not meant to be gospel because like we've seen, they've shifted. They did the windshield wiper thing yesterday. They've done it today. The intensity models keep going up, going down, going up, going down. But they all tell you something. And they all have a purpose. Looking at that again, that wind shear as it moves across in the European model, again, you can see the wind shear is pretty high right now, but unfortunately the wind shear does relax some as the trough approaches. And one of the things we're concerned about is this ventilation effect. So you have this trough coming down across Texas and the southeast U.S. This is what's steering Idalia to the north. We've seen this with Michael and Ian and some of these really strong pre-landfalling tropical storm or hurricanes, rather. They get into this what we call the jet entrance streak, which is this streak of higher winds over the Carolinas. This is associated with Idalia to a degree. So this is the upper level wind map. In the upper levels, you actually see the winds move clockwise again. The storm rotates counterclockwise in most of the levels of the atmosphere. It's kind of hard to understand, but it's in the upper levels, it actually rotates backwards again because the air is kind of like exhausting out the top of the hurricane. Well, when you have these troughs come down, sometimes you get this little favorable interaction for a period where it kind of helps to supercharge the hurricane as it comes up. So you may have that issue here. Well, while you have some westerly wind shear moving into the storm, it kind of relaxes some and the vector changes to more out of the southwest instead of due west, and that jet streak might be able to help it overcome that. And Franklin is kind of feeding this. Franklin's also kind of feeding this little jet streak, so that might be a little bit of an interaction as well. But bottom line is it looks like sometime around the south central coast of Florida, it's going to probably hit a period where it might have a window for rapid intensification. Very warm water entering a jet streak. The only good news is it'll be moving fast, so it won't have a long time to take advantage of this, but that's something we have to watch very carefully in the future forecast regarding Idalia. Dry air is going to be another issue it might have, but again, if the storm's already wrapped up, it's not going to be too big of a deal. The European and the GFS both show that dry air not being able to directly penetrate the storm. It stays pretty much out to the outside. Some dry air will sneak in, but unfortunately, that real dry air does not show up until later. GFS and Euro both see this now, and they have trended upwards. That's why both models are showing a higher storm. In previous runs, it had the dry air actually ingesting into the storm. Most recent runs, it doesn't have it coming in nearly as strong, and that's why you see kind of the storm, the global models increasing the forecast intensity at landfall. We've already talked impacts on the other video. I'm not going to go crazy with these yet because, again, we want to see what exactly we have leaving the coast tomorrow. But again, 7 to 11 foot of storm surge is nothing to screw with. This is like the worst place on earth to be chasing a hurricane, by the way. Besides like some of Louisiana, like the parishes of Louisiana, this is like the second worst place to chase a hurricane. It is nothing but swamp and banjo music and nothing. And if you're out there, guys, if you're one of these people that are going to be go gung-ho out there chasing it, be careful, man. I mean, this is going to be bad. 7 to 11 foot of storm surge is absolutely no joke. And look how far down that storm surge extends, 5 to 8 feet down towards Tampa, 3 to 5 feet even in Tampa. Tampa Bay. We're also going to be dealing with astronomically high tides. We have like a super moon right now, which is going to bring those tides up even higher. So that's going to add on to that water rise on top of the hurricane, and on top, the waves are on top of this water rise. So, it gets pretty bad at the coast. This storm's going to be no exception. It could be a bit larger storm as it moves into. There's some evidence that storms in this kind of downshear environment can actually get a little bit bigger as they move northward. So Idalia is not a particularly big storm right now. It looks a little bigger than it really kind of is, but it has the chance to become a little bit of a bigger storm as it moves in. So we'll have to watch that carefully. And again, I talked about wind gust forecast on the GFS and Euro. So again, both these models see a major hurricane or close to a major hurricane making landfall. So you can kind of get an idea roughly, depending on where you are, of what wind gust forecast could possibly look like. Again, the European model showing hurricane force wind gusts around where that eye comes ashore, and then tropical storm force wind gusts up and down the Florida Peninsula, down well into Tampa, 60s well into Tampa, and then 50s and 60s well back into northern Florida, Jacksonville. You're probably, if this track holds, this easterly track holds, y'all are going to get it pretty good. I'll be getting to y'all's forecast a little more in detail once we kind of stop the windshield wiper thing. I don't want to tell y'all, oh, expect this much wind gust and this much rain, and then it changes again. So if I was in Jacksonville, I'd be preparing for a very strong tropical storm, is what I'd be preparing for. It will not be very long. It won't be like forever like Irma was, and it won't be a massive flood threat for your area, but you're going to be getting some significant wind gusts out of this and a decent bit of rain. Potential for tornadoes is always with tropical systems. So I'll have y'all's detailed forecast a little more probably tomorrow. We'll probably try to nail that. But we're just outside of that window for good calls. But I want to show you all the broad brush maps. Again, rainfall forecasts. I think these will come up for Jacksonville, but the rest of the area looks pretty spot on. A good amount of rain for Florida's west coast. The rain will trail off towards the east coast, where you'll have a little less rainfall to contend with. But back up to the north where this front comes in, southeast Georgia, you're getting a lot of rain out of this. 6 to 8 inches, maybe even more. Not going to be particularly fun. And there are pockets in here that are approaching 8 plus. So it'll fall in a quick period of time, and it may not be pretty when it does so. But again, this will be moving quickly, so we're not anticipating a foot and a half crazy outlandish rainfall totals as of right now anyway. Final look at our intensity and track guidance. This is the evening suite of models at 18D. Again, these were all uniformly more into Appalachia Bay yesterday. The whole cluster has shifted, but again, just because they're all laying on top of each other does not mean that that's where the storm's actually going. You can still find it anywhere in these kind of goalposts, so don't focus too much on this. But this lies well with the current Hurricane Center forecast, and again, some outliers do show it moving a bit further south, but again, I would not trust those too much. It's just one or two models. Nothing really to worry about. And the intensity guidance has come up quite a bit. We are now seeing some models broaching Cat 3 and a lot of models into Cat 2, especially some of more reliable models such as the SHIPS model. And the official forecast is lying kind of at the southern, end of this. But even now, the Hurricane Center is basically on that Cat 1, Cat 2 border. So I think actually now they're into the Cat 2 firmly. But they're still below some of the higher intensity guidance, which is now starting to skirt Cat 3. So I'll leave you with the little nugget that the last time a major hurricane made landfall in the U.S. during an El Nino year, which we're in an El Nino year this year, the last one to do that was Hurricane Betsy in 1965. So there is some historical precedent that this might not be another super rapid, mega intensifying hurricane. That's what we're hoping. But, you're not going to be able to tell that until it's time. So I would be preparing for a major hurricane. If I lived in the Big Bend, I would be expecting a Category 3 hurricane at least, and then would be hoping it was less than that. But this is going to be nasty regardless. It's going to be a hurricane, and it's not going to be pretty when it comes in. So I would be preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, because that's what we do around here. So that's kind of the meteorological explanation into the latest on Idalia here today. I will be back probably tomorrow morning with another video. I've got a pretty long shift at work. We're flying some hurricane hunters out, so we're going to be busy tonight with that. I'll be around for DMs and other stuff like that between now and then, and we'll be doing more posts, but the next video will probably be tomorrow morning, if not tomorrow afternoon. So that's what I got for you guys this evening on your Tropical Update. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.